Policy and Resources Committee on the 9th of March 2021. We'll go straight to number one. Is there any apologies or substitutes?
Yes, convener, apologies from Councillor Davey, with Councillor Nicholl substituting.
Thank you. And two declarations of interest. So that'll be Councillor Boyd.
Yes, item number 4, where you're potentially talking about the Carnoustie and Monteith Men's Shed and Panmure Centre, Carnoustie. I will leave the meeting at that point in time.
Thank you for that, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. Items 6 and 7, reports 8721, 8621. No, sorry. It's capital monitoring, revenue monitoring. I've got a general exclusion as a board member of Angus Alive.
Okay, I see Mrs. Buchanan's just put her hand up, but have you got some advice, Mrs. Buchanan?
Yes, thank you, convener. It's just, could I ask please for Councillor Boyd to explain the basis of his conflict of interest? It's just for the purposes of the minute in terms of the public being aware. Thank you.
Yes, humblest apologies. I realised after I'd started talking that I didn't talk long enough. No, I have been involved with the Panmure Centre for the last 2 years, and I have given opinions in the past. So I feel it's best if I don't make comment this time, or and therefore it's best if I leave the room. Is that okay, Jackie?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Boyd, for the clarification.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's the same declaration as Councillor Devine on the 2 financial reports, the capital and revenue monitoring. I'm a council appointed director of Angus Alive, and I will participate in the meeting.
Super. And Councillor Vaughan.
Exactly the same as Councillor Duff and Councillor Devine, Angus Alive director, but I'll participate in any discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everybody. So we'll move on to the minutes. One is the previous meetings, submit for approval as correct records. The minutes of meetings of this committee of A, 8th of December 2020 and B, 2nd of February 2021. Are they approved?
Good.
Thank you. And 2 special meetings, submit for approval as correct record. The minute of the special meeting of this committee on the 28th of January 2021. Is that agreed?
Good.
Good.
Thank you. And we'll go to 4. Community asset transfer application, Carnoustie and Monteith Men's Shed at the Panmure Centre in Carnoustie. We have a verbal update, and it's Stuart Ball is going to deliver that. Mr. Ball.
Thanks, convener. So first of all, I'd just like to reassure members that discussions between the Carnoustie and Monteith Men's Shed and council officers, including myself, are ongoing. These discussions have proven to be very open and constructive. A fully costed dilapidation survey of the building was requested by the group. This was carried out by an external surveyor on the 15th of February, and that was paid for by the PB monies, which members may recall was originally set aside for a feasibility study. The group were supplied with the report at the beginning of last week, and they have subsequently requested and been supplied with additional information in relation to asbestos within the building and also energy costs. The group have come back with some questions around the terms of any lease, and that's particularly around break clauses, and these are currently under consideration. Obviously, we will try to accommodate the preferences of the group wherever possible, and providing they're reasonable. The group actually have a meeting to discuss the application this afternoon with their local members, and depending on the outcome of that meeting, they may have to take that discussion then on to their board level before a final decision can be reached on whether they proceed with the application or not. As things stand, the group have agreed to an extension until late April. This is to allow them to fully consider all of the information that's now in their possession. And in the meantime, council officers will continue to provide them with any support required to hopefully draw this matter to a satisfactory conclusion. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Are there any questions for Mr. Ball? No questions, any comments regarding the update? No, thank you very much, Mr. Ball. Okay. If we've got nothing else on that one, we'll just move on. Number 5 is an information report regarding Brexit. Mrs. Buchanan, did I see your hand? Oh, Councillor Boyd to come back.
Yes, and he's back in actually now. That's why I put my hand down, Councillor Fairweather. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, moving on. Information report Brexit. The reports by Vivian Smith. Schedule 1 is the Brexit update. So I'd like to also thank Gail Forrest. Have we any questions? Councillor Devine.
Sorry, it's a comment.
Okay, is there a quick question from Councillor Whiteside?
Thanks, Convener. It's sort of a comment with a question in the body of it. It concerns item 2.2, the Internal Market Bill on page 19. I was actually really quite concerned when I saw this because there's absolutely no mention of the risks of the Internal Market Bill in the paper. It seems quite complacent to ignore the implications of this bill. In Angus, we pride ourselves in the world-class quality of the food and drink produced by some of our local businesses, as you know, and the quality comes through the high standards. That's in growing, production, raw ingredients and animal welfare. This will all be put at risk by this bill. And don't forget, this is an area which is very important for our economy, but an area which is already suffering from Brexit through the problems in the labour and the export markets. The bill is considered such a threat by the devolved nations that legal action is being considered against Westminster. And in a report by the Scottish Government yesterday, it stated that the Act allows the UK Government to, in effect, impose standards in a large number of areas that are devolved. This means changes could be imposed, allowing things like hormone-injected beef, GMO crops, reductions in animal welfare standards, rules around harmful pesticides, regulation of food content, risks which have been consistently highlighted by the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign. In other areas, it could affect legislation, for example, on single-use plastics, and perhaps most worryingly, the ability to protect our Scottish NHS from privatisation. The bill has been described as the legislative drafting equivalent of a President Trump tweet. The Welsh Minister for European Transition describes it as an attack on the devolved government's legislative competence, and our own Cabinet Secretary for Constitution, Europe and External Affairs describes it as an act of constitutional sabotage. This should concern us all, regardless of our political allegiances. So in the light of the above, I was wondering if I could ask that we get some further research carried out urgently and an updated report presented to the Policy and Resources Committee as soon as practicable.
We can certainly ask Councillor Whiteside. Vivian Smith, have you got anything you wish to add to that?
Yes, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Whiteside. Certainly the report is trying to set out at this point really the kind of broad overview of what is happening at a national level in relation to Brexit. And clearly there are certain things that we can work on or within in Angus in relation to that. I'd be happy to look further into the Internal Market Bill and see what implications there may be from an Angus perspective, but certainly kind of with a view to thinking through what the implications are for Angus Council in that regard. So happy to do that, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Now, remembering I'm still on questions here, Councillor Miles.
Yes, it's not directly relating to the report, but it's indirectly related to the report. Do you want the question now or the comment later?
If you've got a question, just go ahead with the question, Councillor Miles.
Well, the question is on animal transport. there's new animal transport regulations to be brought in since Brexit, and some of these are totally unworkable, especially with regard to animals shouldn't be transported in conditions of low temperature, and also problems with going on ferries. So I'm wondering if any of that's been highlighted to the officers, or if any concerns been already addressed or looked at, because if these do come into place, it'll make a lot of the animal transport totally impossible.
Okay, I don't know if Vivian's got an answer there.
Convener, Councillor Miles, my understanding is that the farming community are having continued discussions at both the Scotland and UK level with respect to animal transport. Again, it's not something that Angus Council can directly influence at this time. However, it is something that we are aware of in the Brexit Officer Group, and will provide whatever support that we can to our local businesses in relation to this. But it's probably out with the scope of the council to be able to have much of an impact in this area, unfortunately.
As long as you're aware, I'm pleased about that, and any thing we can do, we will do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff, is yours a question?
Yes, Convener, I have a question. I have a comment, but I'll leave the comment for later. Yeah, it was a question really about the financial services sector, which I don't think is mentioned in the report. That obviously it's not just the city of Lunstone, it is quite important in Scotland, particularly in Edinburgh. Indeed, there are companies in Dundee as well. I just wonder if we know what's going to happen there, because that seems to be a sort of a bit of an area that nobody really knows what impact that's going to have on our economy in terms of jobs and prosperity.
Okay, Vivian.
Convener, I like most others on the call here, there is uncertainty around this and further negotiations taking place, I believe, at a national level with regard to the financial sector. We'll keep an overview on any emerging issues.
Super, thank you. Councillor Hands, is yours a question?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Given the animal welfare concerns that Councillor Miles just highlighted, and also obviously with the ongoing COVID situation, how is the capacity within environmental health in the council? Do we have enough capacity to deal with those issues?
Convener, and what I would say is that the environmental health are well plugged into the officer group that we have. They have worked closely with business, particularly business down in Arbroath around the fisheries side of things, the shellfish. The environmental health impact is a national issue in terms of looking at how goods are transported and passed off. Some businesses are looking at bringing in vets and other services to be able to help with this. But Stuart Ball may have some more information that he could give Convener in relation to environmental health. My understanding is that what we're doing in Angus is absolutely in line with supporting business as best we can at this point in time, and we have the capacity to do that and have issued all of the certificates that need to be issued at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ball, have you got anything to add?
No, not a lot to add. I think my colleague has covered it well, Convener. I've been keeping a close eye on this one, as you would expect. Speaking to my service leader in terms of any resource capacity issues that may arise in the future. I've been reassured that the workload surrounding Brexit is manageable. As things stand, we have one animal health inspector who may struggle capacity-wise, but there is backup from other members within the team who have the training to offer support to that individual should that be required. So I suppose, in short, we're aware of the workload issues and don't have any immediate concerns around the capacity of staff to deal with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ball. I'll just go on to comments. Councillor Devine, you had a comment?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to thank Gail Forrest and Vivian Smith for this report because it's one of the fullest Brexit reports that we've had. But I actually find it one of great loss in many ways. On page 17, you've got the EU programmes, and at one point we were being promised that we were going to stay in Erasmus, but we're not. And that is a tremendous loss for young people and staff, and in universities and schools and everything else. And I'm sure quite a few of you remember going to Webster's Theatre and getting a presentation from some young people who were probably from quite disadvantaged backgrounds, but they'd spent 2 weeks in Italy. They'd had 2 weeks with Italian young people here, and the confidence level that these young people had speaking to us adults that they hadn't a clue who we were. But that was wonderful, and we're losing that. And the Turing grant system that's going to be there is a one-way street. It's only British young people going abroad. It's not the young people coming back. It certainly hasn't got the amount of money behind it that Erasmus has. So that is a loss. At PNR, Scrutiny and Audit, I asked Chief Superintendent Andrew Todd about the impact of Brexit on the police. He said at a local level, it's not very impactful at all, but at a national level, it certainly is. We're out of Europol. We don't have automatic access to key databases. And one of the things in that report was the huge increase in fraud, which is, of course, very international. And without access to some of that information and intelligence, it's going to be really quite difficult. And the last thing I would speak about is on page 19, 2.4, Shared Prosperity, UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I was chair of ESEC about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, and at that point, we were very concerned about funding from Europe. And as you know, convener, our area, and Angus very much so, has gained from EU funding. But the Shared Prosperity Fund, it hasn't been well thought through. It's kind of last minute type of thing. And quite clearly, it's going to be a centralised fund in Westminster, which is undermining of the Scottish government. But I fear that some of the smaller organisations that have benefited through, for example, LEADER, just won't get the money that they had before. So thank you for the report, but it is actually quite a sad one for me.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Devine. I'll go to Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. I was actually going to raise that last point that Councillor Devine raised, so you can take my hand now.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, any further comments? No? Okay, and I would also like to thank Vivian and our team for putting together that report. Very comprehensive. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to number 6 is capital monitoring, the General Fund Capital Programme 2020-21. The report is by the Director of Finance, Ian Lorimer, and I'll give also thanks to Don Johnson. You've got the recommendations. Are there any questions? Councillor Macmillan Douglas.
I'm sorry, I've got a comment, Convener. I haven't got a question.
Okay, I'll go. Still go to questions. Any questions? Okay, no, that doesn't seem so. So we'll go to comments. Councillor Macmillan Douglas.
Thank you very much, Convener. Firstly, I apologise that, well, perhaps I shouldn't apologise. You can't see me. It may be a great benefit, but I can't get my video on. And thanks to the Chief Executive for trying to help me, but I still couldn't. I just before, actually, because we've had this report in one form or another. I think this is for the third time, that the underspending on capital from April 2020 to December 2020 was unfortunately due to COVID, and it's something that we've really got to catch up on as we go forward. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Any further comments? No, don't see any. Okay, we've got the recommendation 1, reviews and scrutinises. Is the report agreed? I'll take the silences. Right.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item number 7, is the revenue monitoring 2021 and renewal and repair fund position 2021. Again, the report is by Ian Lorimer, and I give thanks to Jill Rennie as well. We've got the recommendations. Are there any questions? No questions. Any comments? No comments. Okay. You've got the recommendation 1, review and scrutinise, 2, note, 3, approve the developments, and 4, agree. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Go to number 8, community orders, coronavirus, Scotland regulations 2021. The report is by Catherine Lindsay, and a thanks to Peter McDonnell. You've got the recommendations. Any questions? No questions. Any comments? No. The recommendations 1, note, 2, consider, and 3, require. Is the report agreed? Agreed, thank you. Okay, number 9 is the grant agreement with Voluntary Action Angus for 2021 to 23. This report's by Vivian Smith and Kelly McIntosh, and we've got thanks for Pete Morton. We've got the recommendations. Are there any questions? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm sure I've asked this question at previous meetings where this grant has been agreed, but I've always thought that the Currymuir Friday night project seems a very expensive project. I mean, I'm familiar with Friday night projects elsewhere, and I think it's at what, £14,000–15,000. It does seem a lot, and I've asked before for why it's so high in Currymuir, and I seem to remember last time being told, well, there's minibuses and whatever, but it does seem a lot more than we're spending on a similar ventures elsewhere.
Okay, anybody like to answer that? Vivian, Kelly?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Duff. And most of the Friday night projects, and there are a number of them across Angus, as you know, are funded or have been funded for a number of years now. And the anomaly with this one being funded through Voluntary Action Angus was in relation to them actually doing a lot of the volunteering work there. The majority of the funding that comes in either through our own Friday night projects that we run as a council or through the Currymuir one really is a transactional cost that goes from ourselves or from Voluntary Action Angus to Angus Alive for the hire of the premises. And so that is where the main costs are incurred in relation to Friday night projects. There are some smaller additional costs for things, activity type costs that are brought in from time to time, but the main costs are accommodation costs, which circle back round for the hire and use of the premises that Angus Alive are running on the council's behalf. So it's quite complicated, but I'm happy to have a detailed conversation, Councillor Duff, around that if that would help.
Yeah, I might take you up on that, Vivian. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Devine. Is it a question, Councillor Devine?
Yes, thanks, convener. It's at 3.3 as well. The volunteering services for young people. It's fascinating, this, because over the last year or so, actually, it's been volunteering for adults that VAA has been particularly wonderful at. I wonder, how does the funding work then? Is this specifically for children, young people in school? Because they've done a great job with the adults.
Convener, if I might come in, thank you, and thanks, Councillor Devine. The funding for Voluntary Action Angus is made up of a range of different monies. Some come directly from Scottish Government and are supplemented by the grant that we give as a council to Voluntary Action Angus. And there are some legacy funds that Voluntary Action Angus receive as well. So there's a kind of a broad funding package that they have to engage with adult volunteers and young volunteers. They are directly engaged in working with young people, not necessarily in the school, but more so in the community. And that's the side of it that we are really trying to continue to support through our communities teams. And I don't know if Kelly is on the call and would like to give a bit more information around that. Thank you.
Are you there, Kelly?
Yes, I am. If I can just come in, I'd be delighted to come in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so Voluntary Action Angus, I don't know if elected members will remember, but back in early 2020, we hosted a series of events called Everything is Learning. They were locality events. And the Chief Executive of Voluntary Action Angus headlined every single one of those events, and they had members of their team there. And the focus there was that everybody in our community is involved in the learning of young people, and volunteering was very much part of that. So the commitment from Voluntary Action Angus was actually to offer a learning volunteering opportunity to everybody in our schools, especially those in the senior phase. And sadly, obviously, because of the situation we've been in the last year, it's been very difficult to take them up on that and to pursue that further. But we will continue that work with them. There are now SQA qualifications in volunteering that children can do when they're at school. And it would be marrying up the opportunities that Voluntary Action Angus can give our children with them being accredited appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. That's added flesh to the bones. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We've got Councillor King.
Yes, convener. I was a wee bit disappointed in the response we got from Vivian Smith. It seems that the Friday night projects are extremely fragmented in the way that they're being funded. I was wondering if we could get a report brought to us giving an overview of these Friday night projects, where they are, what they're doing, how much they're costing, and how they are actually being funded. Because it strikes me from what Mr. Smith said, that they're being funded in a number of ways, a lot of which come back to the council either through Angus Alive or through VAA, and it would be useful just to see a total picture of who's doing what, where, how much it's costing, and who's actually paying for it.
An awful lot of work, Councillor King. Vivian, would you want to come back?
Yeah, convener, I'm happy to have a look at that and again, Stuart Ball may want to come in on this, because the majority of the Friday night project funding comes through the communities teams. But happy to bring something back in consultation with Stuart Ball and Kelly McIntosh.
Mr. Ball, have you got anything you want to add?
No, I would agree with my colleague, convener. Quite happy to work together to bring something back to committee.
Okay, is that okay, Councillor King?
Yes, convener. It's just a case that it struck me that these things were going on and we didn't really know what they were doing, and we didn't really know how they were being funded.
Okay, no doubt we'll find out shortly then. Okay, any further questions? No, any comments? No comments. Okay, we've got the recommendation. 1, agree. 2, authorise. And 3, agree. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We go to number 10. SSSC Employee Registration Policy. I'll give it its full title, Scottish Social Services Council. The report's by Sharon Faulkner, and you have the recommendation. Are there any questions? Councillor Hans.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Given this is a policy, and given that we got the copies of the letters at the back of it, and I'm trying not to go into an operational area here rather than looking at the strategic side of it. I was just a bit concerned about the fact that the use of reasonable adjustments isn't really covered in the policy when it's looking at redeployment and capability. And I'm kind of taking this from my experience on the appeals committee, subcommittee, and I'm a bit concerned about what line managers are, with the conversations they're having with staff about reasonable adjustments, about the potential of redeployment, because sadly we see it when it's come to the end of the road. And I'm just wondering if there's maybe some training in there for line managers to go along with the policies. Obviously, it's a very, very broad policy, and the application of it in most cases will be really straightforward. But I'm thinking in terms of, mental health, cancer, some longer term diagnosis that might actually, through treatment, mean that the person can re-register. So I just wanted to know really just how much support can be factored in within the policy itself as well.
Mrs. Faulkner, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, convener, and thank you for your question, Councillor Hans. We are, in fact, putting together some specific training around this policy for managers. Our OD team are currently working on that, so they were just awaiting this policy being approved in its final format before taking that forward with managers. So just an assurance for you, Councillor Hans, that will be built in terms of reasonable adjustments that might be made in terms of people's jobs. The HR team also work closely with managers when there are any issues in this regard. So hopefully, we would be able to put something in place for anyone who was affected.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. A kind of related point. Given that our papers are quite long, and we're supposed to concentrate on strategic and policy matters, I don't think we need to see specimen letters in the papers. I mean, I'm quite happy that the officers do those, and we don't really need to know or see them. I'm not sure what that adds to the papers. It's on a longer agenda, and it's just personally information I don't really need to see, I don't think.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Okay, well, all right, we'll go on to, is there any further questions? No, any comments? No, okay, we've got, it's just the one recommendation, and it's committee approves. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, and we go to number 11. Is the health and safety compliance. The report is by Mark Armstrong, Deputy Chief Executive, and I'd like to give thanks to Jackie Semple. You've got the recommendation. Are there any questions? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. On page 90, it's the strategic directives, and it's about number 8 down. To ensure that contractors are competent to manage the health and safety aspects of their work. Now, I'm sure this is an incredibly difficult thing to do, but I was wondering what steps are taken, because I've had a couple of comments made by constituents about people rocking up in vans where there's maybe 3 of them very close together, no masks, and then they get out and they're working quite closely together, and again with no masks. So I just wondered what steps were taken by the health and safety executive, health and safety team. Can I just finish with a comment though as well, because at the CCC, the trade unions were very supportive of the team. They said that they had helped them all the way along the line through the pandemic and couldn't thank them enough for the huge amount of work that Paul Conroy and his team did.
Okay, thank you.
Convener, through you.
Want to come in?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much, Councillor Devine, for reflecting back those comments from the Central Consultative Committee. I think you're quite right. The trade unions, I think, have found the work that the health and safety team, but I think all services have done over the past year to ensure the safety of our employees and the public has been exemplary. With regards to the specifics of your question, there are a number of aspects to this. Clearly, whenever we're procuring work or commissioning work, there are requirements in the kind of contractual obligations, and I might ask if Ian Cochrane wants to come in and maybe add some value to that. But then similarly, when we're engaging third parties in delivering services, we are kind of involved in basically ensuring that they're complying with what they should be doing. And what I would request to all members is, if they are being given intelligence about individuals who are subcontracted to the council, who they believe, I mean, your examples, Councillor Devine, were probably in relation to COVID compliance. If they're experiencing practice that is not in line with what is the recommended guidance or behaviours, then please to advise the appropriate officers of that, and we would pursue that. I don't know if Ian Cochrane wants to say anything about the kind of contractual requirements that we would build into particularly construction related contracts.
Mr. Cochrane, do you want to come in?
Thank you for that. Yes, we've obviously been in contact with a lot of our contractors over the last 12 months, particularly as they return to work after the original lockdown, and we would require them to obviously comply with the guidance in place at the time, including on things like social distancing and lift shares, etc. You know, we continue to work with them, but we would obviously equally be content to take any reports of where we think our contractors are not compliant. I trust that assists.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. I take it that does assist. Okay, have we got any further questions? Any comments? I'll take that as a no. Okay, we've got the recommendation, 1 note and 2 note. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we go to 12 is the possible exclusion of public and press. You've got the paragraph. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, and we will move to, I think you've got another link, a Teams link, so we'll move to that. Thank you very much.